Welcome to the Mixology Talk podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Julia, and we're the folks behind A Bar Above and Top Shelf Bar Supply.
So I help run A Bar Above, and I also help bars and restaurants with their beverage programs.
And I also help run A Bar Above, and I also run Top Shelf Bar Supply. We make pretty awesome bar tools that you can find on Amazon.com/Top Shelf Bar Supply. I think you'll find that we have some of the better items out there.
I agree.
If I do say so myself. He says that because he's the one who basically designed them. So a little bit
They're pretty
partial.
good. Yeah, I like them.
They're all right. They're all right. This is episode number 149, and this week we're talking about raising your prices. The topic this week was actually inspired by an email I got a couple months ago by somebody who was actually struggling with this very problem, and it just felt like something that would make a perfect podcast episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I actually remember this question, and they had a very unique scenario. So hopefully we'll cover all the topics that we discussed in that email, and hopefully offer up some insight for anybody that's listening as well.
And how to tackle some of the challenges along the way. I know raising your prices is not always going to go over the best with your customers, so we can touch upon that as well.
So the first major question when you're thinking about doing price changing, or even if you're considering doing a price change, is why? Why should you do it? And there's a couple different reasons. The first of which is if you're listening to a terrible podcast that brings up the subject of pricing, and you're like, crap, I should probably do that.
I should probably look at that.
Yeah.
But why would you be listening to a podcast about pricing?
Right.
That would be ridiculous.
Who does that? It's such a bad use of time.
So forget that one.
Right, exactly. But there are some really good reasons for doing this. First of all, if you are a new manager or opening a new spot, this is something that you're going to have to do. If you have no prices, then you're probably going to have to go through this same process. But if you're a new manager into a bar or restaurant or relocating from a different area, this is something that you should really take a look at as well.
I mean, I would imagine that's probably pretty core to the skill set of being a manager, knowing how to sort of navigate this kind of question.
Right, absolutely. And, this is such a critical thing to do right in the beginning. Like one of the things that I mentioned a long time ago, I can't remember, I think it was like management skill sets when you become a new manager in a place, is don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
That first couple of months, you don't really want to make a lot of significant changes because you're still getting your bearing. You don't want to go in there and start changing everything when you don't know the culture. So those first couple of months are a really good time to really understand the pricing and get your head wrapped around it. So if you're a new manager, definitely take the time to understand kind of the pricing structure and the strategy that you have at your bar.
And what you might find is that there isn't a lot of strategy to it, or that there was a strategy that was chosen a long, long time ago and it hasn't really been reassessed recently.
Right.
If you haven't changed your prices in, what would you say, more than a year?
Yeah.
More than 2 years?
Yeah, I'd
certainly
say
if more than 2 years.
For me, it was always a yearly thing. Like in January when it was slow and I had downtime and I needed to fill my time and still kind of drive the business forward, this was the perfect thing to do, is items like this. So if it's been a while, if you're a new manager, these are all great things to take a look at for price changing.
Well, and if you have that time, I think that kind of takes us to the next topic, which is hitting your numbers. Like if you don't know what your numbers are, then you're not going to know if you're hitting them or not.
Right.
And so once you have a little bit of time to actually invest into, I'm going to say the S word, spreadsheets.
So, yeah.
Keep it PG, everyone.
Oh, man. Whew.
Spicy.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, spreadsheets are just one of those critical tools that are going to replace your shaker, essentially, when you become a bar manager.
That's a sad proposition.
It kind of is, but it also opens a whole new skill set up for you to navigate and learn and master, just like the shaker. I guess that's a terrible analogy, isn't it?
You kind of brought it back.
I tried.
No, I thought you were going to go with like, you leave the shaker behind, but then you need to drink more because you're trying to deal with spreadsheets.
Oh no, that's true. It's so true.
Yeah. So maybe you're just not doing shake and drinks. Maybe you're just doing like built cocktails.
In spreadsheets.
Right. We lost it there.
I think we did. But Julie brought up a really good point of knowing your target numbers. And this is something you should know if you're going as a new manager. You should agree upon. You should understand. Everybody should be on the same page as far as your numbers go. And this is something that you can do immediately. Is like, all right, load all my inventory into a spreadsheet unless there's already one, and then just start calculating out my pour costs. Is there any large variations that I can immediately see? And that could be something that we really could be a low-hanging fruit, really.
Definitely. And by the way, I think it's very tempting when you run these numbers to say like, I want my margins to be, instead of some sort of target number, to be as good as possible.
Right.
It's very tempting to go that route, but it really doesn't give you anything to aim for.
Well, and it's actually a detriment. It can be a detriment because I've talked to people that have super low cost of goods at like 9%. And I'm like, you're ripping off your customers, and people are going to figure that out pretty quickly. So lower cost of goods is not always the best approach.
Right. And by having a number to aim for too, I think there's a morale impact. I mean, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this topic, but if you just tell all your bartenders, we want it as good as possible, there's nothing to drive towards. There's no incentive there. There's no like sense of we made it or we didn't make it. Or so I would strongly say that pick a number. And if next quarter you found it was too easy to hit it, change it. It's not like you're getting it tattooed anywhere, although I would not be surprised if there was a bartender somewhere that had this tattooed somewhere.
Absolutely. So before we even dive into the numbers and hitting targets and stuff, I think kind of backtracking one second and saying, all right, fine, we know now what our target numbers are, but let's figure out some of the other things that may be affecting our cost of goods sold. And it could be something simple as training. Maybe the bartenders don't know the recipes. They're not adhering to the same recipes. Maybe the POS buttons aren't actually right. Maybe the house pours are off. There's a lot of debate in a lot of bars I've worked at and consulted on, where it's 1.5 versus 2 ounces, and nobody agrees on it, and nobody tells a manager for years. This blows my mind every time I work with a new client. I feel like we should
make a T-shirt that just says like, "What's our standard pour?"
Right. I mean, everybody should know this like the back of their hand, and this is something that's going to absolutely affect your cost of goods. Is not having alignment on these things. And so that's a really good place to start before we actually go in and do any price changes, is get your training done right.
Yeah.
And get everybody on the same page as far as what is necessary for your beverage program.
Right. Okay, so let's say you have done the math, you have crossed your T's, you've dotted your I's, and you have decided for whatever reason that it is right for you to go ahead and increase prices. I think now is the harder question, which is how do you actually go about doing that?
Yeah, and this can be a really tricky scenario. So one of the things that we talked about just a little earlier was spreadsheets, how powerful they are, how important they are. And the higher you go up in your career, probably any career, I would imagine, the more important the spreadsheets really become. So load up your inventory, run your numbers, make sure you know what your cost of goods targets are, your pour cost target is, and see if there's any major outliers. So if you're pouring, Pliny the Elder at, let's say, a 30% cost of goods or a pour cost, maybe it's time to increase the price on something like that. So that would be the first step. And that could be phase one of your pricing changes.
Yeah, it's true. You don't need to roll this out as like one big whammy.
Right. And that may actually cause a little bit of sticker shock to your regulars.
Yeah.
So maybe doing slow, gradual increases. I mean, there's a lot of theories around it. And you can do whatever you like. But it's just something to take into consideration when you're doing price increases, because anything that affects your customer's wallet, they're going to notice.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think to your point, start with those opportunities. At least look for those opportunities. And I would also say to don't limit your sort of conversation to just alcohol. Take a look at your coffee and your tea and these sorts of pricing as well. There may be some opportunities there, especially to your next point, which is comparing it to your competition.
Yeah, and this is something that is really critical to understand your place in the market. Take a look at who your competition is in a fairly tight area, let's say like 5 miles, because that's about the mileage, the zone where you're going to be operating in.
Unless you're in a super big city, in which case it might be 5 blocks.
Right, exactly. Or it could be even bigger if you're on BART or something like that.
Consider your own marketplace. Who do your customers consider to be your competitors?
Right, exactly. And just take a look at what they're selling and what they're selling it for.
You could do some serious reconnaissance here. It would not be the worst project ever.
No, and this could be something, that that you can do as an employee incentive. So, for example, if somebody sells a certain amount of money, let's say you sell 30 glasses of Riesling on Monday or Tuesday, or whatever contest you want to run, and say, okay, cool. As your prize, I'm going to send you to this restaurant for dinner. Do me a favor, when you come back, I want to bring back the menu. Or bring back a picture of it. Well, not steal it, but bring back a picture of the menu or something like that and talk about your experience there. So you're getting kind of a double whammy on your effect there. This is something I learned from one of my mentors. I thought it was pretty cool. That's a good
one, yeah. You can also check Yelp.
The menus are all online,
A lot of people post pictures on Yelp that say you're going to want to check the date. Because again, other people might be raising their prices.
Right, exactly.
Maybe other people listen to this podcast. Rumor has it there's like 3 or 4 of you.
I know.
So
crazy.
You could be in the same market.
Right.
It could happen.
But the point is, you could do a pretty quick, just kind of glance at your marketplace and get a general sense of what's out there, where you are. Do you need to increase your prices? Because if you're still selling $5 pints in San Francisco, you're behind the ball. I hate to tell you,
you're missing out.
You've lost a lot of opportunity costs over the years.
That's for sure.
But just take a look at who your competition is and see what they're charging.
Yeah, absolutely, and also for things like sodas, for low alcohol cocktails, for non-alcoholic cocktails if you offer them. Around here we're starting to see kombucha cocktails.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it's a little bit on the hipster side of things, but they're out there, and so try to find what other people are charging for the same thing, at least to give you some sort of ballpark, because that's what your customers are going to expect to spend.
Right. I remember I actually went through this exact exercise and when I was working in San Francisco. And my beverage program was running pretty good. I felt pretty confident. I raised a couple prices here and there. And then I got to the non-alcoholic section and I was like, what the hell did we do? We've been charging $2 for espresso at a fine dining restaurant for months. Everybody else is charging $5 at the neighborhood bar down the street. It was
nice.
and we were doing tableside French press and we were charging $4 for it. I was
man.
What?
Yeah. So, it just didn't come up.
No, it didn't. So
you're looking really hard at those sort of
the big categories, the major categories, right?
You overlook these sorts of things,
right?
So it just goes to show, it's all worth a glance,
right? So absolutely take a look at that. Bottled water, any of those things that you sell. Obviously, when you approach this kind of project, you want to go for the highest impact. So start with your top sellers, and then slowly start moving down the chain.
Certainly.
Yeah. So that's how I would approach this problem for sure.
So arguably the hardest part of any price change is going to be the part where your customers see the new price on the menu.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very easy to put in a spreadsheet and go, ooh, look how much more money we're going to make. It's much harder to answer the question when your regular comes to you and says, hang on a second, this is always $13. Why are you charging me $14? And they're right. That isn't what they expected. But of course, it's hard for the customer to see that over the course of the last year, you might have been charging $13, but it's been costing you a little bit more every single month.
Yeah.
The cost of goods has been creeping up on the back end, and they don't see that. And it's your job to kind of be the intermediary.
Right. And I mean, it's common sense that pricing will change over time. I mean, groceries change. The price of gas changes fairly frequently. So, and if you look at your invoice, when you actually order stuff, it changes every freaking time.
Yeah.
I mean, with spirits especially, 3 cents here, 4 cents there, and it just kind of creeps and creeps and creeps. So you can just say, hey, these are seasonal adjustments that we have to make in order to stay in line with the business. And it's very true. It's, just being honest and transparent is definitely a good way of going about that.
I would definitely agree with that, but I do think there's also some ways that you can soften the blow.
Right.
One of the things that you can definitely do, and this is kind of a strategy that you hear about in marketing circles, is to sort of communicate that the price change is coming, but make it clear that it's not coming yet. And I'm phrasing that poorly, but something along the lines of like, hey guys, we're increasing prices, but for the next week, we're going to honor our old pricing so that because we don't want you to be upset, so we're going to honor our old pricing. It makes it sound like a promotion almost.
Right.
But in actuality, you're just delaying your price increase by a week or a month or whatever feels right to you.
Yeah, and this is a great form of communication. Everybody gets a heads up. They know it's coming. There's no surprises. Because if Joe has been coming there for 40 years, drinking the same thing over and over and over again, and all of a sudden...
He obviously values consistency.
Right. His, $4 shot of Johnnie Walker Blue Label is no longer that. He's gonna make a case.
Right.
When
I think by giving yourself a little bit of time, you can kind of start having the conversation with your regulars, right? If somebody comes in every Thursday, then maybe next Thursday, hey, heads up.
Right.
And then it hits the following week.
And for anybody listening on the podcast and not seeing it on YouTube, I rolled my eyes when I said $4 Johnnie Walker Blue Label. If anybody didn't get the sarcasm, yeah, it was there. It was definitely there.
I'm sure that was communicated non-verbally.
This will help soften the blow. Now, one of the other things that I've done and I have seen done in the past is if you have a regular that is a diehard and they drink the same thing every single time they come in, they're consistent, they're great for your business, and they make it a point that, all right, I'm not going to come in anymore. And, or for whatever reason, if it's a good faith gesture and you want to tell them how much you appreciate them, I've seen people actually create a special button in their POS just for this one customer.
Which is, talk about a gesture.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You're not going to want to do this for anybody else.
Well, and keep in mind also, you could probably never increase that guy's price.
Right, it's done.
Next year, when you increase that $4 to $5 or the $5 to $6, that one guy is stuck.
Right, and he's going to forget all the good faith that he's gotten from you for a year, and he's still going to be upset about that.
Yeah.
So
be careful.
Pick your battles very carefully.
But if you've got somebody who really he or she, I should say, helps make an awesome vibe. They just really improve the quality of experience for other guests. Maybe that's an investment you're willing to make.
Right, absolutely. So, these are all things to take into consideration. Like, when do you roll it out? One of the other things we were talking about was to do small incremental increases in your pricing as well. So if you run a seasonal menu and you do seasonal changes in your menu rollout, this is a good idea to just kind of add on that quarter every single quarter, and all of a sudden by the end of the year you're up to the dollar that you needed to cover whatever. Yeah. However you want to do it.
So if you need to go from $15 to $16, maybe it's $15.25 with the spring menu, $15.50. Is that what you're saying?
Or something like that. If you want to do a bigger jump in the beginning and do smaller jumps later, however you want to do it is really up to you. But this kind of pumps the brake on a sticker shock a little bit.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. The nice thing about having an updated menu is that instead of saying, okay, and Manhattan is going from this dollar amount to that dollar amount, it's an entirely new cocktail. So instead of it being your springtime fizz, it's now your
Paloma or something like that.
Right, exactly. Right. And so it's a completely different cocktail. So it's not as hard for a customer to see the price change because they don't completely understand that it may or may not have the same cost on the back end.
Right.
But it sort of smooths the blow. And then what happens is, 3 or 4 seasons later, you've got a pretty big disparity between your specialty cocktail menu, your seasonal menu, and the rest of your menu. And so it's less of a blow when you start to sort of even that gap over time.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of different pricing strategies. I think we actually covered this with the BevSpot interview a little bit.
A few months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. But there's a lot of different pricing strategies you can do. One that really pertains to this scenario here about doing a price change, price increase, whatever you want to call it, is to do a lump sum pricing. So this is something Julie and I talked about a little bit ago. If you look at your product mix and you see that some of your lower alcohol style cocktails, like your coolers and fizzes and, you know, stuff where you're not pouring a bunch of booze, is in high demand, then this might be a really good opportunity for you to do a lump sum pricing. Basically, all of our house specialty cocktails are $13.
Right.
And this covers all of them. So your old fashions, your Manhattans, and your spritzes and all that other stuff too.
Well, and this might be a really good strategy if, like you said, you look at your numbers and you find that those lower cost cocktails actually sell really well.
Right.
Then while you might actually have, you know, worse numbers on your spirit focused cocktails, if you sell fewer of them, on average, you might still be coming out ahead with this sort of line item pricing.
Right. And this is where it becomes a lot of fun, you know, balancing all these things out and, you know, pulling a little bit of money from this place to put into this place, all in the spirit category, obviously, can really be a lot of fun.
It's called embezzlement.
Yeah, it probably is. But like if you have a Johnnie Walker Blue Label that's $50 a shot, maybe, you know, there's a lot of revenue there you can pull into your By the Glass program or something else, or house cocktail program. So there's a lot of opportunity to really move the numbers around, which is a lot of the fun of pricing strategies.
So I know we tend to talk a lot about sort of numbers and management spreadsheets and that kind of thing. But again, this is just part of the sort of holistic picture of making sure that your bar is actually making money.
Yeah, absolutely. And the really beautiful thing about all these things that we've talked about adjusting numbers and going through all these different scenarios, is when you develop the skill set as a manager of running spreadsheets and managing spreadsheets, you could do all this in theory, a completely theoretical makeup and pricing and everything based off the last quarter's numbers.
So you could like pull the last quarter's numbers and say, okay, well, if I charged this instead of that and this instead of that, here's what my margins would have been.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, of course, we're cheating a little bit because if you change your numbers, if you change your prices, your customers probably wouldn't have bought exactly the same things.
Right.
But I mean, it's a really great representation. It gives you a good sense for where to start.
It's going to get you in the ballpark for sure. So this could be, you know, a couple clicks of the button. You could have all this information and exactly what you need, and then you can make a call based off of that. So this is something that I've done a lot in the past, and I highly recommend doing as well.
And increasing prices is inevitable.
Right.
Unfortunately, procrastination is probably not going to help you here. In fact, it's going to hinder, because if you wait too long, you're going to have to increase your prices more. And that's going to be that much more painful for your customers. So I would say get in a habit. Make this a part of your regular quarterly thing you do.
January house cleaning, man.
Right, exactly. If you get in a habit, then it's not going to have that sticker shock, because your customers aren't going to be so shocked to see that number that's been the same for 3 years suddenly be different.
Yeah, and absolutely. And one last point is on the flip side of that. Make sure that you adjust your pricing downward if you see something completely out of the normal too. You know, as a respect to your customers, and just to be fair in the marketplace, do that service to your customers as well, because that's another form of customer service.
That's a good point.
And hospitality.
Keeping an eye out for anomalies in either direction.
Absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So as usual, you can find all of the show notes at mixologytalk.com/149. We'll include the link to the episode you mentioned with BevSpot. And of course, we'll include the notes from this episode as well. And as usual, we're going to post this on Instagram. We're going to post this on Facebook. And hopefully there'll be a little bit of input from you guys. Let us know in the comments, what are your tips?
Yeah.
How have you been able to ease the transition with customers when you've got to increase those prices for business reasons and you really don't want to burn those bridges? We would absolutely love to hear your tips.
Absolutely. So you can find us on Instagram at, obviously, Abarabug.
Abarba.
And we look forward to hearing your comments.
Cheers.
Cheers. On that note, here we go.
I'm running out.
Oh no. I hear other things are so hot right now.
So hot.
It's so hot right now. Let's do that one again, shall we?
So as usual, you can find the sherbet.
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 Sherbet's so good. I love me some sherbet.